today we're going to dive into a really key concept from the Project Management Body of Knowledge, or the PMBOK Guide, and that concept is tailoring. You can think of it as the art of making your process fit your project perfectly, instead of trying to force your project to fit a rigid process. And let me tell you, it's absolutely crucial for getting great results.
So let me ask you a question. Have you ever been on a project where the process felt, I don't know, more like a straitjacket than a helpful guide? Where you're just going through the motions, filling out templates that don't add any value, and following steps that just don't make any sense for the work you're trying to do? Yeah, it's a super common frustration, and it is the exact problem that tailoring is designed to fix.
You see, here's the fundamental problem we're talking about. When it comes to project management, one size fits none. Seriously, the whole idea that you can take one single, rigid methodology and just plop it down on top of every project, well, it's not just inefficient, it's practically a recipe for failure and a lot of unhappy team members. It all boils down to this one simple but powerful sentence from the PMBOK Guide. Each project is unique. Every single one has its own specific goals, its own stakeholders, its own crazy challenges. And you know what? The moment we really, truly accept that fact, that's when we can start building a process that actually supports the work instead of getting in the way. And when we ignore that uniqueness, what happens? We create waste. So much waste. We're talking about documents that nobody ever reads, meetings that could have been an email, and processes that just slow everybody down for no good reason. This is where adaptation is so important. But to adapt well, you first have to know what your options are.
Okay, so if we can't use a one-size-fits-all approach, how do we adapt? Well, it all starts with understanding the menu of choices. A great way to think about project approaches is that they exist on a spectrum. On one end, you have the super structured, plan everything out, predictive approach, and on the complete opposite end, you have the really flexible, roll with the punches, adaptive approach.
Here's a great analogy to make this crystal clear. Think of a predictive approach like you're building a massive skyscraper. The architectural blueprint has to be absolutely perfect and completely locked down before you even think about digging the foundation, right? The scope, the schedule, the cost, it's all defined up front because making a change halfway up is unbelievably expensive. Now, an adaptive approach is more like designing a custom home with a client. You start with a general vision, but the final plan evolves as you build, as you get feedback, and as the client changes their mind about the kitchen tiles. Now, and this is really important, this is not a black and white either-or choice. As you can see from this diagram, it's a spectrum. The reality is that most projects in the real world aren't purely one or the other. They're usually some kind of hybrid that lives somewhere in the middle. The trick is figuring out where your project falls. And here's a good rule of thumb. The more uncertainty and unknowns you have, the more you should lean toward the adaptive side.
So let's talk a bit more about this predictive approach. You've probably heard it called waterfall. This method really shines when your requirements are stable and everyone knows exactly what needs to be built. You plan the work, then you work the plan. It's perfect for that skyscraper or maybe for projects in heavily regulated industries where you need that meticulous upfront documentation.
But then you've got the other side of the coin, the adaptive approach, which most of us just call agile. This approach doesn't just tolerate uncertainty, it thrives on it. It's built for projects where you fully expect the requirements to change and evolve. You work in these short cycles, you get constant feedback, and you adjust as you go. This is your custom home build or that software project where you're figuring out what users want as you build it. This diagram does a great job of breaking down the two main flavors of adaptive work. Let's make it super simple. Iterative work is all about refining. You build a rough version of something, you show it to people, you get feedback, and you make it better and better, over and over again. Think of perfecting the user interface of an app. Incremental work, on the other hand, is about building in complete, usable chunks. You deliver one whole piece of the puzzle that works on its own, like completely finishing and furnishing one room of a house before you even start on the next. And honestly, most modern agile methods are a smart mix of both. Okay, so now we get the spectrum, right? We've got predictive on one side, adaptive on the other, and a whole lot of gray area in between. But the big question is, how do we actually do this? How do we pick an approach and then customize it? Well, the PMBOK Guide doesn't just leave us guessing. It gives us a really straightforward 4-step process to follow. And here it is, the official process. As you can see, it just flows logically. You start big by selecting a general approach. Then you narrow it down, tailoring it to fit your organization's rules and culture. Then you zoom in even more and tailor it for the specific project you're working on. And finally, and this is key, you set up a system to keep improving as you go. Let's break down each step. Right, so to nail this down, the 4 steps are: 1, select your initial approach. 2, tailor it for the organization. 3, tailor it for the project. And 4, implement ongoing improvement. See how it's like a funnel? You're moving from a really broad choice down to these fine-tuned continuous adjustments.
Okay, let's zoom in on what I think is really the heart of this whole thing, steps 2 and 3. This is where we move from theory to practice. This is where the rubber meets the road, and you customize your approach for your specific company and your specific project. See, no project ever happens in a bubble, right? Step 2 is all about facing reality. It's acknowledging your company's context, its specific rules, its unique culture, its existing processes. So this might mean you have to adapt your brilliant plan to use a standard company reporting template or follow a very specific governance process that's already in place.
Then, once you've looked at the organization, you zoom in even closer to the project itself. You have to ask, is this a massive, super complex project or something small and simple? Is this a mission-critical system where failure is not an option, or is it a low-risk experiment? Is your whole team in one room, or are they spread out across 5 different time zones? Every single one of these factors demands a different tweak to your process.
So what does this tailoring look like in the real world? Well, it's about being really intentional. As you can see here, it involves both subtraction and addition. You have to be brave enough to look at your process and get rid of the steps that just don't add any value. But at the same time, you can also add new practices, maybe on a trial basis, to see if they help. Maybe you try a new daily check-in for a week and see if it makes the team more effective.
And that brings us perfectly to the final step, step 4, which is a huge mindset shift for a lot of us. Tailoring is not a set it and forget it kind of thing. Effective tailoring needs constant feedback loops. Through things like retrospectives, your team should always be asking, hey, is our process actually working for us? What could we do better? This is what ensures your approach evolves with the project, not against it.
So when you pull it all together, what's the big idea? What's the guiding philosophy behind all 4 of these steps? It really boils down to this simple but incredibly powerful goal of applying just enough process.
Here's the official definition, and I want you to focus on one word here: deliberate. Tailoring isn't just winging it or making things up as you go. It's a conscious, thoughtful choice to make the process serve the work, and not the other way around. It's all about intentional efficiency.
And this slide right here, this shows you just how fundamental this idea is to modern project management. The principle, tailor based on context, isn't some nice-to-have suggestion. It's a core directive. And as you can see, it influences every single aspect of a project, from how you plan and deliver, to how you manage stakeholders, to how you deal with all that crazy uncertainty.
And this is the ultimate goal. This is the whole point. This quote sums it up perfectly. You want to find that sweet spot, using just enough process to get the job done, while at the same time maximizing value, managing costs, and enhancing speed. It's about being effective without being bureaucratic.
So that's our deep dive into tailoring. As you can see, it's not just some abstract theory. It is a super practical tool that you can use to eliminate waste and make your projects run better. So I'll leave you with a challenge. Think about the project you're working on right now. What's one meeting, one document, or one single process step that you could challenge tomorrow? Start there, apply that just enough principle, and see what happens.